Well, when I think of Shangri-La, this idyllic paradise hidden away, I obviously think of military defense conferences
In Singapore.
in Singapore.
It is weird that they call it the Shangri-La Dialogue.
I wish I had an explanation for that, but they just held the specifically Shangri-La Defense Forum in Singapore. And yeah, I have no idea why they call it Shangri-La.
I bet we could find out with Wikipedia. I don't know.
How about if you find out, you leave your comments below?
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a big defense conference, and a lot of different countries showed up. I mean, obviously, the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was there. He didn't go missing this time, just mysteriously for days at a time.
I'm sure he's feeling great now.
Yeah. I mean, Shangri-La. There was also, the Philippines was there. Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine showed up.
Yeah, that was unusual because it was like I think that was the thing that made the biggest splash news-wise, is that Zelensky showed up.
Well, to me, what should have made the biggest splash is what the Philippines did. But we'll get into each of those as we go along. I guess since we're in America, we'll do the America thing first. Talk about Lloyd Austin. It was very interesting. He made a point of saying that war with China is not imminent or inevitable, which was interesting. An interesting thing to really make a point of saying. And I guess in a way it's technically true. I hope. I don't think it's necessarily inevitable. But it's still he's very much of we need to have talks. Because if we have talks, we won't have war.
I mean,
well,
is he going to come out and be like, well, we're headed toward war, guys?
Well, he just didn't have to say anything, right?
Right. Well,
no, I think essentially the biggest thing that looms over this dialogue every year is the U.S. and China.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would offer a slightly different perspective, which, Lloyd Austin, if you're watching this, obviously, this is for you. From the Chinese Communist Party's perspective, they are already at war with the United States. And so to say it's, not inevitable, it's clearly inevitable because it's happening now, but it's a one-sided war because they're using, better than anyone, gray zone tactics and non-combat type warfare. So, and in particular, the Communist Party sees themselves internally. If you read their internal messaging and white papers and stuff, they see themselves as continually at war with the United States. And so this is a, more broadly speaking, failure of our military to understand the non-military means in which this warfare is happening. The things obviously we talked about on the show: media warfare, propaganda warfare, drug warfare, economic warfare, you name it. The warfares are there.
Well, you already named it, Matt. But yeah, that's a very good point. And this is a consistent failure of many U.S. administrations, that to the failure to recognize that we are already at war, just because it's not a kinetic warfare.
I would be interested to know how they internally talk about this.
Who?
The U.S. government. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. We've spoken to plenty of people who have been in that world, and there is usually some degree of disagreement.
Yes, that's true.
And then there's an overriding voice that says, no, this is what the message will be.
But I think it's also true that, it's usually the Department of Defense and the military side that is more alert to, these different warfares that Matt's talked about versus, the diplomacy side, like the State Department, or probably even worse is the Treasury,
Commerce.
Commerce has actually been all right because a lot of the sanctions against China have actually come through commerce. So
it's true, and
the trade representative and things like that. So I think they've actually had to have a tougher stance than Treasury, which is even under the Trump administration, Treasury was the one that seemed to be most accommodating, appeasement focused. I mean, Steve Mnuchin did, produce movies with Chinese production companies. So.
Oh, that's right. Can you remember any specific one off the top of your head?
The movie? What?
Well, I know he was executive producer of the first Wonder Woman movie, but I don't remember if that was.
Was Legendary Pictures involved with Wonder Woman?
No,
I can't
that's
remember.
that's the part I don't remember.
Yeah.
Legendary was involved with Dune, which we just
Oh right,
recently
yeah, we
saw.
watched Dune like
Part
the
two,
other
yeah.
week, and it was like first thing that comes on screen is Legendary.
Yeah, if you didn't know, China.
Yeah.
China. I like the movie though. Did you? You never read the books. We'll take a quick detour to talk about Dune. Thank you for joining us on our little tangent. Welcome back to the show. Yes, so Matt, you made a great point about that we are already at war, and that is something that needs to be kept in mind, even if our own officials are not saying so.
Yeah, no, I agree. I made a great point.
Yes.
Well, I do think that the more that popular sentiment towards the CCP is like, look, we can't trust them, the more that will empower officials to, take actions.
Yeah. Well, I think it also stands in stark contrast to what the Philippines was saying there, that if China kills a Filipino, I don't know if it was like specifically like a military personnel or just like a Filipino fisherman or whatever, that war could be on the table. And that is very open, strong language coming from the Philippines, which I think it's amazing to see how much their rhetoric towards China has changed over the years.
I mean, I hope that it never comes to that. But if it does come to that, the key will be if the Philippines is drawn a line in the sand, so to speak, are they going to take that military action when it happens, or are they going to back down? And if they back down, then it could be Scarborough Shoal all over again. That is in the 2012 thing that we've talked about repeatedly,
But
where
I think,
the CCP just knows that it has carte blanche to keep pushing.
Yeah,
I think like the good thing about what the Philippines strategy is that it's not like Marcos just came out and said this. You know what I mean? It's like the Philippines has shown since he became president that they are going to steadily push back on the CCP.
Yeah.
So now when they say this, then the CCP's got to be like, oh,
It's a calculation.
then it's a calculation about whether you mean it or not versus like if you just come out and bluster, but in your actions you're like appeasing the CCP, then it's more likely that they will just be like, this guy's just blowing hot air.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But yeah, as Matt said, like that is the danger with red lines. Like once you draw a red line, you have to actually act on it.
I think that's what David Stilwell said on our podcast a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a good point.
Which unfortunately, like, so if the Philippines and China does come to blow, technically the U.S. has a defense alliance with the Philippines, and that should mean the U.S. gets drawn in. But when asked about that, Defense Lloyd Austin, Secretary Defense,
It's the words are there in some order.
Assemble them yourself.
Yes.
He refused to like comment on that. He's like that's a hypothetical. I don't know. Where our support is ironclad, but not actually going to say like, yeah, we would honor our treaty and actually be there.